Next up, we want to talk about tap water. This is a fun topic. I have heard a lot about this. It's been all over in the headlines. Brown tap water after an SUV hits a hydrant, or that was in Ironton, Ohio. See, what's this one? Washington Post reporting what's known about Philadelphia's drinking water after a chemical spill. This is to say nothing about things like the EPA studies showing PFAS in drinking water, or the issues in Flint, or the issues in New Palestine recently. There's been all kinds of reasons why drinking water has been in the headlines. And that ultimately led me to finding this article from National Geographic called, and I like this name, "Is Tap Water Safe to Drink?" Reading quickly from here, most U.S. residents don't need to worry about the safety of their tap water, but millions of Americans are still exposed to contaminants every year. It can take a water crisis to highlight where drinking water infrastructure is failing. One of the most devastating water crises in recent memory was the lead contamination in Flint, Michigan's drinking water in 2014. As of January 2023, 9 years after the initial contamination, residents are still dealing with the effects. Last year, a water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi left many of the city's 150,000 residents without potable water, a problem that persists today. In the U.S., about 90% of people get their tap water from a public water system. They call those PWS. Nice acronym. Water from a lake, reservoir, river, or aquifer is piped into a water treatment facility where chemicals are added to the water that bind to pollutants and are sifted out of the system. Some facilities use bacteria-killing UV light. Chemical disinfectants such as chlorine or chloramine are then added to the water to help kill any pathogens remaining in the water and any that might be lurking in your pipes when the water travels to your home. Of course, that's another element, is how old is your house? What are the pipes made out of? I didn't even think about that initially. Mm-hmm. Some water treatment facilities, from lack of funding or too little oversight, don't effectively clean their water. In 2015, about 21 million people living in the U.S. were exposed to tap water that violated federal guidelines, according to a study published in 2018. In 1974, Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act, which gave the Environmental Protection Agency the authority to regulate public tap water. When something like lead, for example, is shown to be harmful to human health, the EPA can set a limit for how much is allowed in water supplies. Limits are based on what amount is safe for human consumption and what is technologically feasible for water treatment facilities to accomplish. But these limits don't always result in water that is contaminant-free. Quote, "There is a gap between what is legal and what is safe," unquote, said Sarah Grady, a science analyst at the Environmental Working Group. She adds that many regulations are based on decades-old science, which the Environmental Working Group has argued makes regulations outdated and inefficient. That was not what I expected out of that article. I thought this article was going to say, yes, your water's fine, calm down. But when at least 10% of the U.S. population may be drinking water that isn't completely safe, that's concerning. What are you thinking?
I think that there's a lot of different ways to go here. I think that as pharmacists, and we want to have this evidence-based study that I think, can convey the entirety of water safety, I think it becomes very hard.
Yeah.
When you're saying lead is good or bad, that's very easy. But when you're looking at the totality of everything from microbes to different types of metals, to then the source of the water is maybe coming out at a good quality, but it's going through these old pipes in a home, totally upsetting the apple cart there. It becomes so difficult, I think, to put together a very specific answer to this. So I think that it's just going to be, in my opinion, a lot of just generalities and just speaking about, I think individualized treatment to what you do here.
Yeah.
I think for me and my family, fortunately, I do have the capacity to put in water filtration. And it was at a time in my home where I could do it. I did do that. And is that because I read this evidence-based study that showed that my water in this town was no, but there are certain points where what do we do with our money? What is potentially advantageous versus what is black and white advantageous? What has no downsides outside of the actual money? And when I looked at it that way, not to mention taste and things that are a little more superficial and cooking quality and clothes and things like that, and even shower water, I decided to do it. And I do have the filtration, and that's not doable for everybody. And what becomes very difficult is where the bar goes up for those that probably need it more is low income, is rural, is areas where those financial bars become much higher. And also financial barriers become much higher.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, where you have to install a lot of these water treatments would still end up putting them through your old pipes to some extent.
Yeah.
So there's so many levels here. But in general, when you're looking at something like ingesting chlorine, the benefit of it is to kill microbes. So I get all of that at my local township level. But when it comes into my home, I get rid of the chlorine via this mechanism that then puts it through my fortunately new pipes.
Yeah.
So for me, I know that I've been able to do X, Y, Z. And again, I think there's so many different directions here. But if it's like this black or white recommendation of what you've got to do, or you're harming your family because you don't have a whole, no, that's not, I want to make that clear. That's not, it becomes, a hierarchy of finances and what is your local situation and what do you deem important. I think another, not to keep going off in tangents here, but the other thing you can do is the water that's most critical. Before we moved into this home, we had under sink filtration.
Yeah.
There was reverse osmosis. And yes, technically you could say some of the cons are it can be a little wasteful to water. That is true. It also does take out some of the minerals that can be beneficial. But I think if you have an overall healthy, balanced diet, I don't necessarily need the minerals from water that are coming, in my opinion, again, in a breakdown of positives and negatives. To me, that underwater unit was financially very viable. I think it was $150, $200. I had auto shipped, once or twice a year filters that you replace so that, this essentially what happens is after a couple years, then you're not really filtering anything. So you've got to stay on top of it, but there are ways to do that. And that was kind of plan B at one point for me. So I think there's a lot of different angles here, but those were my initial takes anyway.
That was always very important for my wife. I always thought she was just being ridiculous because I look around and I go, wow, the rest of the world doesn't have potable water at all. Like in Africa or in South America, just not having your kidneys stop functioning at 20 is a real problem because you don't have clean drinking water. What are we complaining about if our water tastes a little funny or whatever? It's fine. That was my perspective. Yeah. But I hadn't even thought about, no matter how clean the water is at the facility, it still has to get to you. And who knows what's in between those two points.
If your home was built in 1950, it's going to be different than if it was built in 2015. There's just different standards and different, they're not using metal pipes. So I think too, not to get too philosophical here, but I think this applies to so many things when you're talking about diet or supplements. But there's a gap between, this was the quote, there's a gap between what is legal and what is safe. What do I need to necessitate black or white better health for me? Or what, hey, if I can spend this few bucks or take this extra step, what can possibly be beneficial? And I think versus what is damaging or illegal. I think those bars are so different. And I think that's so much what becomes the core of a lot of these chats about things like this.
Yeah. Dante?
Yeah, I would say that, I fall somewhere on the same spectrum there. Definitely. And on the flip side, there's new legislation probably that's going to be passed soon. There's some stuff pending with additional government money being, funneled into these wastewater plants being built to help try and mitigate all of these potential issues and new contaminants that we're worried about, the, PFAS or whatever.
The forever chemicals.
The forever chemicals, yes.
Yeah.
Things that just stay in your body.
Yes, which apparently there are thousands, and now the EPA is going to start testing for, I think, 9 of them.
Yeah.
And so I think what you have to see happen is there's an organization like the EWG who serves as almost a little bit more of like the not the whistleblower, but kind of just they're a little more alarmist. You go on their website and you punch in your zip code, and you're going to see your town has levels of a certain contaminant that's 217 times the legal guideline, or 48 times, or 711 times. Like, practically speaking, there's really nothing you can do. There's really nothing you should do about that, you know, when you see that information. But it's useful because hopefully it's pushing the EPA and the individuals doing research at that level to say, okay, what's the merit to some of these concerns? It's a very large spectrum.
Yeah.
But at least the information's out there that, hey, this stuff is in the water. We should be mindful of it, but there's really not a whole lot you can do. You know, or you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it is the fact that we can get drinkable water from our sink at any point in time, unless you live in Flint, Michigan,
right,
is a modern miracle. That is amazing. But it's not to say that it's perfect.
Yep.
And there's always room for improvement, especially as we gain new information and have new research. And it's useful to have a group like the EWG
to say, hey, like all of these things exist.
Right.
You know, you shouldn't panic. But then when you see it, like,
yeah, you can pull up on their website.
Yeah, you see chloroform, potential effect, cancer. Dichloroacetic acid, potential effect, cancer.
Cancer, yeah.
Nitrate, potential effect, cancer. You know, you start to see that and you're like, holy crap, like maybe this is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, it freaks me out.
It's not that you shouldn't care, and maybe it can freak you out a little bit, but like Joey's saying, there's certainly a balanced approach that can be taken. You know, and if you're the family that bought at the beginning of the week, you go to Sam's Club and you buy 16 cases of water, maybe you should chill, like, because then there's the environmental perspective as well. You know, if you can cut the bottled water down slightly and you funnel some of that money into a filter for your fridge or a filter under your sink or a Brita filter.
Right.
And then sometimes, you know, when the Brita filter goes bad and you forget to buy a new one, a couple days of tap water is probably not the end of the world either. So some balance of all those things, I still think makes the most sense. Because, you know, or again, if you have the ability to have a filtration that covers your whole home, then you probably will save money at the end of the day as far as all the bottled water that you would need to purchase.
Yeah.
You know, so my goodness, there's so many ways to slice this. And then on a very micro level, you know, hey, I'm going to bring a water bottle to work that I bought that has a filter in it. And so I can use the tap water from work, and I know that some level of this is being filtered. Great. If I go to a restaurant and I drink a glass or two of the tap water, I'm probably okay. I don't need to like look at the waitress funny when she just says all we have is tap. Like, you know, it's like there's these super intense, polarizing movements on this whole water thing is the end of the world. But beyond it, a crises, beyond those sorts of situations, you know, making little, what's the word? Not sacrifices, but little pivots
adjustments
here and there to some bottled water, some tap, some sparkling, some glass instead of plastic. You know, I think that's the recipe. If everybody can mix it up a little, if possible.
And it is useful to have, not useful, this sounds terrible, but when there is a major crisis, it is a good reminder, if that's not your drinking water, of just how good we have it most of the time, that it is actually a big deal when there's lead pipes, that it is actually a big deal when a train derails and we burn off chemicals. Like, that's a big deal because that's not the norm, because our water is remarkably safe considering everything else.
Yeah. And it becomes so difficult too, because then you go into these things. Well, you know, are you inviting more government regulation in to have these different levels change? And then are you trusting the government to say that it's clean after the train derailment? There's so many angles, the whole Aaron Brockovich stuff and all those things that can come of this. You can go down a rabbit hole. And I just still think it comes back to, you know, if you are able to do something basic, again, like a system, like Dante said, even over time, it's not going to take much for you, especially honestly, there's a lot of crappy bottled water out there, for lack of a better term.
Well, you think mostly tap water, just put in a plastic bottle.
The one that's $4.99 for a case is $4.99 a case at the gas station for a reason. It is. And it doesn't mean you have to buy the $4.99 bottle of smart water either.
Right.
There's you know, middle ground there, but you have to look at those kind of things too. I think that if you can put a little bit of investment to something that, again, maybe you can't draw like, hey, I got this amount of lead and I know lead's bad, so that means I'm harming my family if I don't. If you can find a happy medium in between there and do something about it, I think overall it's a good move. These forever chemicals and stuff, I do think they're an issue. We've got plastics and remnants of plastics everywhere in our lives. And
yeah.
There's only so much we can do about it, but I think this is one of them that at a reasonable price you can.
And I should also say this. Not only can you look on the Environmental Working Group website to see what their rating of your local water supply is, the local water providers are required to put out a report every year about water quality and different issues. You're supposed to be able to go to the EPA website and find them all, but the EPA website is
rough.
It's rough. It's a government website,
yes,
and it doesn't work very well. So I was able to, on the EPA's website, I could find my local water supply, but they didn't have a report. And then I went to my local municipality, to my town's website. I found the report on there. So it was available. It had been done. It just isn't being tracked on the EPA's website. So if you're curious, go check out your local government's website. Get as granular as you can. Look up the name on your water bill. That'll probably find it. And then you can get some details that way. So you will know just how bad it might be or not be.